What's it like being black in America? Me and my boy Just Dre, yep, we're going to talk about it. So stay tuned. What's going on, folks? It's your boy Javier Javier with the Javier Javier Show. Make sure you say it twice. I'm here with my boy Just Dre. We finna talk about being black in America. Say what's up to my boy Just Dre.
What up, America?
America, and the rest of the world who's watching.
Yeah, I mean everybody who left, you know what I'm saying? Zombie apocalypse about to take over.
Y'all
better get y'all lights on.
Don't say that. You know people gonna take you serious.
You better stay Purelled up.
Purell. You know we got the cure right here.
Yeah, it's the real cure. Hey, holla at me, man. We got
Corona.
this for the low right now. You know
Corona for the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you ain't joined the Hobby Lobby yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. You know, hit that bell, get all the notifications of the future videos about religion, politics, and culture. So, we're talking about what it's like being black in America. And we decided that this discussion should start off with the Black Panther movie. I know it came out a while ago, but we was talking about the comparisons between King T'Challa and your boy Killmonger, my boy Killmonger. Right. So, he was saying, I'm Killmonger and he King T'Challa.
Right.
So, explain... I'll go ahead and lay a little groundwork. I think that sometimes doing the right thing can lead to the wrong result. And sometimes doing the wrong thing or the dark thing that people may not consider to be the right thing sometimes gets you the results that you want. So I'm more adhere to that kind of philosophy. And he was saying basically that doing the wrong thing is never really the right thing to do. So you agree with T'Challa mostly. I'm not gonna sum up what you really think. You can tell them what you think.
So let me just lay it out. All right, so I get what you mean. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of how this whole thing sparked off. We agree on a lot of things and stuff. So for example, I know the real world we live in is not like a Disney movie. You know what I'm saying? It don't the good guy don't always win. It's not always fair and stuff. So I do understand sometimes you do need to take measures and everything like that. But I'm speaking philosophically and how that kind of came about is we were trying to make a comparison between he and I. And I was saying I'm Professor X, he's Magneto. And the whole reason for that is just, he's more survival of the fittest. You know what I'm saying? Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you know what I mean?
You don't think can't pull them up if you ain't got none.
Can't pull up no boots if you ain't got none, man.
Yeah.
When the great Martin Luther King, who Professor X was kind of modeled after, by the way. Wise man right there, man. So.
Yeah, so it basically comes down to it, how it's like being black in America. Now, I can't speak for what it's like being black in Britain or, the EU or somewhere like that. But as far as in America, I kind of basically sum up two types of black people. There's really three. And the one is the black person who says that America is fundamentally racist and that America is oppressive to people of color. There's the second type that says that we now live in a society where you can be what you want to be and that you don't have to worry about racism as much. So go out and make something out yourself. And then you got maybe the third type is more of the one in between. He's the person that says, yeah, there's racism. We should be fighting actively against it. But at the same time, there are opportunities that, a lot of us don't take. I think I'm more of the third type. Would you consider yourself the third type or would you consider yourself?
Me personally, that's my whole thing. I don't think they're all exclusive. I think it's possible to be all three simultaneously.
Okay, that makes sense. So, do you think America is fundamentally racist?
Fundamentally, it was literally built off of racism. Literally, it was literally in the Constitution that we were only 3/5 human.
America began before.
How do you even find that measurement? How do you even figure out the measurement of how human somebody is?
We know. Okay, so I think it's like this. I think you would agree. Slavery was more economic in the beginning than it was as far as racist. It was more of, we see an opportunity. Let's take advantage of this group of people. We'll get rich.
I think racism. I'm sorry, not racism. I think slavery in general, fundamentally, is economic at its core. I don't think like the main purpose of racism is like to actually persecute or like cause trauma or pain to particular people and stuff. I do think there's different brands of racism, and there's definitely an American brand of racism.
Okay, yeah. So let me ask you this, because I think that we found out that slavery was not really economically smart. Slavery was actually an economic disaster.
Really? How do you figure that?
Because we found out that not only did you benefit more by treating your workers better, people who worked on their own volition and did it by their own will, they worked better, they worked smarter, they worked harder for people. It also built morale. It allowed people to develop relationships and to talk to their workers and find out what's working, what's not working, and it actually increased the economic benefit. It was worse to have slaves than not have slaves.
Okay, so like two things. Okay, so one, if it was worse to have slaves than to not have slaves, then like why they have slaves? Two, I understand what you're saying about morale and stuff like that, but like, we talking about feelings, and like numbers don't care about feelings. Like you either pay somebody and you're losing money paying for that labor, or you could just enslave a bunch of workers for free.
But you can't just enslave a whole bunch of workers for free. You can enslave them, but you still have to house them. You still have to feed them.
Okay,
you still have to clothe them.
Those are all operating costs.
Yes, those are operating costs.
Right.
Which it may be more expensive to do those operating costs than to allow people to clothe themselves with the money you pay them and allow them to feed themselves with the money you pay them. Mm-hmm. So if you just paying them, let's say hypothetically speaking, you paying them $10 an hour. Mm-hmm. As opposed to you not paying them at all, but you paying for their clothes, their shoes, their housing, those type of things, and let's say it's costing you $15 an hour. Mm-hmm. It's better to give them that $10 an hour and let them find a way to get those things with that $10 an hour than you spending that $15 an hour, but you getting free labor. Because it's still costing you on the back end. Plus, slaves run away. You have to invest in capturing them, pay rewards. Right. Slaves fight back. Sometimes slaves kill their own masters.
All right, let me ask you this then. So, like, based off of that, why do you think, if that's true, then why do you think that slavery persisted the way that it did?
The same reason cavemen, didn't drive in cars. It takes time for humanity to wisen up and to evolve.
Okay.
I'm saying though, our ancestors wasn't the brightest people in the world. I mean, you gotta think about where we came from and to where we are now. Let's just say to the 60s. We're totally different now than we were in the 60s. People evolved.
What do you mean?
Humanity as a whole, but also specifically white people. White people are not the same white people that was 100, 300 years ago. They're different. A majority of white people are not as racist as they used to be. Cause science.
How do you know? How do you know that? Though?
Well, I can't know that for a fact, but I can compare it to where we are as a society today compared to where we were under Jim Crow.
Okay.
White people,
right.
Black people, everybody started clicking to people. People started working together, realizing this ain't good. This is bad.
People? This is right. But what people though?
Certain white folks and Black people. People who came from slaves or people who were slaves.
Right, but so what you're not saying, all right, so because what it sounds like you're trying to say is okay, white people in the 60s, there was a shift or something like that, and the evidence of that is because of this elevation of rights and stuff.
It was constantly shifting.
Right, but see, my thing is this though, but what you're not saying is, it wasn't there was just this great epiphany of white people, and they're the ones who pushed the civil rights movement.
There were a lot of white people who were against
Black
it.
people, a lot of Black people had to suffer, to go to jail, get their ass bit by dogs.
Yeah, true. I'm not belittling. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that white people were the saviors. What I'm saying is, in order for us to achieve the things that we achieved, it took the cooperation of Black people fed up with what was going on, speaking out, and white people, some certain types of white people, being able to hear out what Black people were complaining about and speaking up against, to say, you know what, you're right. Because honestly, if no white people ever was persuaded by our argument, I don't think things would have went the way that they went. But of course, we were the ones who were on the ground because we were the ones suffering from it the most. I'm not saying that black people weren't the core of what happened. But what I'm saying is that took growth. That whole movement, from black people's perspective, it took some black person saying, you know what, I'm tired of this. It took, you know, the Underground Railroad, black people going and fighting and getting each other out of there and stuff like that. That took growth, it took strength, it took courage. Sometimes people didn't have that. We developed that over time. We grew. And certain white people woke up and they grew as people. And we started working together and trying to overthrow the corrupt system. So that takes evolution. We've always been evolving into better human beings.
Well, okay, like to be fair though, so like there were like white people during slavery and like what were they called, abolitionists or whatever. Like there were like a certain fraction of white people, you know, like that were like progressive, for lack of a better term. But like, let me ask you this, because you're making that claim. So like, so would you sit here and say that like percentage wise, like there was there was a percentage of white people that was at least equal or better or more than those who weren't as progressive? Because like, I don't want to say racist, so we'll say not progressive.
Okay. I don't know, but if I had to make a guesstimate, I'd say I think it started off with more people being against it than for it. But I think it eventually grew to where the majority was against it than that was for it.
What, slavery?
Yes, eventually. Because it started off small and it grew. And the more it grew, like when Martin Luther King made his I Have a Dream speech, you know how many white people he convinced that day that, you know what, that makes sense, that's wrong. He fundamentally woke up something in a lot of people. That grew the numbers of the amount of people who was actually against Jim Crow. Okay,
but like, do we know that it was a specific, like, this awakening of white people? Because to me, like the only white people that really helped, if there was a few like that was converted, it was very few. Like the ones like that were helping, like already had that disposition, like already had those principles and stuff. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Some of them were convinced. Some of them were.
Well, yeah. I mean, we can say like some of them were, but like we can.
I'm not saying the majority was. I'm not saying that. I'm saying over time, more and more people either switched sides or came out and spoke out because they saw what the injustice was. Even though they already felt that way, they didn't. It wasn't until they saw somebody else doing something about it to where they got the courage to say, you know what, I'm gonna stand up too. But where we are in the society, I think majority of white people are not racist. At least they don't know they're racist, or at least they don't act out racism, or...
Yeah, like, I wouldn't say, like... Well, okay, so one, right? So we could talk about racism, like, as a whole, like, and I think depending on who you are, like, there's, like, a whole spectrum of racism, right? Like, it can be considered racist to be followed in the store or something like that, right? But you got, you know, people who survived the 60s looking at that like dang, fuck out, like, that's not racism. Like, I got bit by a dog, that's not racism. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's like a spectrum and stuff. But like, for the sake of argument, like what I would say is that I do agree with you that I would not say that all white people are racist. I would say that the right white people are racist. And like by that, when I say the right ones, I mean the ones who matter. Cause like, I mean, everybody's prejudiced. My mom was the most racist black woman ever. Like, she, like,
your mama
like for real. Like my homegirl Jamaica, what up, Jamaica? Like my homegirl Meeks, like she is the most racist. Like she hates a certain group. I'm not gonna say which group it is, but she like.
What's your homegirl name?
Her name is Meek. I'm gonna say Meeks.
What's up, Meeks? If you watching this, what's up from your boy Javier?
What up, girl?
He said it, I didn't.
What up, girl? I'm gonna hit you later on, but yeah. But anyway, so everybody has, like, the average American, everybody has their own prejudice and stuff, and like I get y'all argument against like the left, like trying to pretend like we don't inherently have prejudice, like we do. Like what I mean by that is like the right people. Like what I mean by that is people who
there's prejudice
where like it actually counts. Like if you're like in an office and like you have dominion over something and like your thought process affects those people's lives and stuff, like that's when it's a problem. If you're like a politician or like the president, you know what I'm saying, like that's when it's a problem and everything.
Okay, so with that being said, I agree with you. The only part where I disagree with you is I gotta ask you this question. For one, it's very hard to prove somebody's intentions. It's very hard to prove somebody's a racist unless they actually say or provide some kind of evidence that you can point to and say,
but it's not though.
That's why you did it.
But it's not though. Because you can look at, okay, so if somebody has a record of doing something against its patterns.
Yeah, a pattern is evidence.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so we agree on that. Like, you can't just be like, oh, you know, like, I failed high school because they didn't like black. Like, no, you didn't study, bro. Like, that's why you, so
okay.
Like, we agree on that. Like, I don't feel like everything that is being called out, sometimes, like, people, I see, like, Black Twitter going off about something, I'll be like, okay, like, that's not racism. Like,
so let me ask you this. Do you think that racism is a big problem in America?
Like, I think it's a big problem. Yeah.
How much, if you had to put racism on how much it affects you on a scale between 1 to 10, how much would you say racism affects the average black person of the age?
Well, see, that's a very complex question because like then we gotta ask how far back do we gotta go. Right? Just
in today's time.
Yeah, how still though, because
you're the byproduct of.
Well, I was gonna say for some people again, because like I want to stress, not all black people are the same. We're not one monolith thing, you know, walking around and stuff. But like what I will say for some black people, I'll say for a lot of black people, like our present day positioning is indirectly affected by our history.
Do you think that you should be worried about black and Chinese racism?
What you mean?
Do you think you should be worried about Chinese people being racist against you?
Should I be worried about that?
Yeah. Do you think that's a problem in America?
I think racism as a whole, like just like the mentality of racism.
So it's not fundamentally just white and black.
I want to say it's fundamentally no, but historically, like
of course,
it's been predominantly white and black, and like not just even white and black, like it's literally been white in every other race.
You think so?
Like where am I lying?
Well, I mean, look, of course we're having this conversation, and we don't have statistics or facts to back it up. What we're talking about right now, but we kind of like to have these discussions on like an everyday basis, just normal people having these conversations and seeing where it goes. So what I'm saying is, we're talking about being black in America.
Right.
A lot of black people out there focus on white people being racist against black people. You would agree to that?
Why though? That's what I'm saying though.
I'm saying, would you agree that a lot of black people out there are focused on white people being racist towards them?
I agree that anybody who's facing the transgressor is naturally going to be like concerned about that transgressor.
And you think we live in a society where we should be more concerned with white people racism than Chinese racism or Japanese racism or Hispanic racism?
I believe that we should be concerned of the malevolent intentions of anybody who are in positions of power. And in America, like that's historically like predominantly been white people.
Okay, yeah, let's get into that. Let's talk about power, because I'm not saying this is what you're saying, but I hear a lot of people saying you can't be racist unless you have power. I personally disagree with that. I don't know if you agree with it or disagree with it, but let's get into the whole conversation about people with power being racist. Okay, so do you think that it's the norm or it's within the average human being to get into a position of power and not discriminate against people for certain things?
I don't think it's possible.
Yeah, on an average basis. Of course it's possible, but do you think that if you took humanity as a whole, like the average human being, do you think it's innate in human nature to have biases and to discriminate against people based on certain things? Like, for instance, let's say I start a company and I got a childhood trauma, and I was abused by my father, and my father had this yellow T-shirt that he loved, and he always wore, and he used to beat on me a lot of times. He was wearing that yellow T-shirt, and every time that I get somebody that I interview for my company who's wearing a yellow T-shirt, I don't hire them. Do you think that it's normal, or do you think it's within human nature to make that error and not know it, or to discriminate against people based on things that have nothing to do with their qualifications? Do you think that's something we can get around, or do you think that's something that we just have to chop up and it's baked into the cake?
I think this, right? And we were just talking a little bit ago about the different spectrum of like racism, and like you asked me like who to worry about most, right? So like somebody who don't like me because I'm, and like to answer your question, like cause I'm not tap dancing, like to answer your question, I do think it is innate in us and stuff, right? But to push that furthermore, like I'm not worried about, I don't have to be worried about my neighbor because I'm black, like they don't like me or whatever like that, right? Like there's that type of racism, which is like basically bias and prejudice, and then like there's racism just for no reason, like for like how like they used to boil slaves and shit like that, and like tar and feather, like that right there is a whole nother thing. So like me, you ask who I fear, like I'm not fearing the person who just don't like me and doesn't have no recourse against me. Like I fear the person who don't like me, but is in office or can like influence policies that directly affect me.
Do you think that it's possible to live in a society where those things no longer matter? Do you think it's possible for humanity to reach a place where discrimination is no longer a factor, or it's so minuscule that it's not?
I think. See, like that's hard. Okay, so like, are we talking like?
Because we fight for stuff.
Are we talking philosophically, or like, are we just talking about just DNA? But we're talking about biology, basically.
Yeah, that goes into a deeper conversation because then we have to take into account environment. We got to take in account genetics.
So all those things matter, though.
Yeah, but as we know, based on history and how humans are made up, do you think we'll ever reach to that place we're fighting for? Fighting to...
I don't, man. Because, like, you know why? Because, like, you're always going to have different perspectives. You're always going to have different perspectives. You know what I'm saying? And, like, as long... Because what's, like, the other alternative? Like a one-world order? Like a one world order? Where, like, we just have one government and, like, everybody, like, the whole world... Like, we're not going for that. Like, there's way too many different creeds, nationalities, like, two different... You know what I'm saying? So, like, that's always going to be a thing.
So... That brings up another question. If you don't believe something is attainable, should you fight for it?
I believe that you should always strive to be better. Yeah.
Okay, to get as close as we possibly can to that dream.
Yeah, because why wouldn't you do that? Like, what's the alternative?
I mean, I agree with you there.
Because it's like, I mean, if you don't, like, we still be slaves. Like, if you didn't, we'd still be using coal and we'd still be on horse and buggies and shit. Like you always want to push to be better, man.
Do you think that black people are different than white people?
What do you mean by different? Like, what do you mean?
I mean, it doesn't have to be in a negative way. Just, do you think that black people are, like, based on your genetics as a black person, do you think that it leans you more towards certain ideas or certain intelligence or certain abilities? Like, do you think black people are, on average, stronger than white people, or faster than white people, or smarter than white people?
I think this. See, like, Tim, why you had to ask me that?
I mean, you can say, I don't think that it matters. I don't think that it matters. You could say that.
So, like, if we're talking realistically, okay, so, like, all right, so let's start. I'll say this, like, I feel like, now, you know, don't forget that, like, that's a PC answer. Like, I'm just gonna be real and shit, bro.
That's what we do.
You know what I'm saying? Black people, right? So, like, let's use, like, the most obvious example, sports. We talk about basketball or football or whatever like that. Like, why do you know, but then see, like, that's a trap, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, see, like that whole conversation, that's a trap, because if we say, okay, black people obviously are stronger physically, and like look at the numbers, then like the next argument is like, well, look at the owners and shit. So what? White people smarter or some shit? So like I don't. So like
that's a road we shouldn't travel down. We shouldn't even look. There's this book called The Bell Curve, and there's this guy who wrote this book, and he gets a lot of slack for it. Basically, because he went investigating the differences between races and IQ level. Mm-hmm. And basically, people thought he was racist for doing it. Mm-hmm. And he was basically, I think the results, I'm not sure, I didn't read the book, but I did listen to the podcast with Sam Harris and the guy. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about, these are the results that I found. And I put the results out, and people were upset about the results. Mm-hmm. Do you think we should even be bothered looking into that stuff? Or do you think that it's useful to actually look into those things?
I think if there's a reason, like if like the world, like if aliens came down, like and like we need to know these things about us and shit, then yeah. But like
but you don't know what you need to know until
it's too late. What I'm saying, but like so like if there's a certain event, like let's say like the Monstars come down from Space Jam, and it's like we need to like pick our best basketball player ever. Like you're gonna pick LeBron, you know. You're gonna pick Michael Jordan. You're gonna pick like who you know and stuff. Like to go back about like your question and stuff. So like I think strength. I think there's two things about that. There's biology and then like there's intelligence. I think like those two things are separated. Black people, I do think we're superior. I do think we're superior biologically. And like the reason, and like I know I'm black. I'm supposed to say that, but like the reason I say that. Like when you look at sports and everything, right? Like just by a lot, like Bo Jackson, like this fool, this nigga ran up a wall, son. You know what I'm saying? But like,
your boy DMX ran up a wall in a movie.
Yeah, yeah, right. In a movie, I'm talking about in real life. Like look up Bo Jackson anywhere, but like before y'all get all upset talking about you racist and stuff like that. I do think a lot of that had to do with breeding and slavery. Like, so if y'all mad, like, be mad at Grandpappy and them because, like, they would literally breed the strongest African slaves and, like, they produce a big super slave. You know what I'm saying? Then generation after generation, you get a LeBron James, you get like a Serena Williams. You know what I'm saying? So, like, yeah, like biologically, I do think
Africa has the most diversity in genetics. Though people try to think of Africa as one country. Yeah. Africa is a continent with multiple countries.
Yeah, right, multiple countries.
With multiple, like you can't just look at race. You have to look at abilities, cognitive abilities. You got to look at height. You got to look at speed, strength. You got to look at multiple factors. Noses, eyes. Like Africa is the most genetically diverse continent on the planet, and life began there. They're actually looking for the smartest person in Africa because they believe that the next Super Einstein is going to be from Africa because it's so genetically diverse. So there's this big debate about, I don't think race is even a thing, to be honest. We all originated from the same source. We just picked up different characteristics along the way.
But race is a thing, though.
It's become a thing.
Like race is a thing. Cause like I hear what you're saying. Like in theory, yeah. Like that sounds.
Like biologically, there's no such thing as race. Right. But metaphysically, right. I guess, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Just like money. Like I think Sartre made that point one time. Like of course money's not real, but we make it. Like we put importance on that. Now, like for whatever reason, like not for nothing. And like that's why like I like Jordan Peterson so much. You know what I mean? Because like he really breaks down like he talks about hierarchies and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And like if you listen to him talk about hierarchies, like it makes sense. And like that's why my answer to your question before when you asked, do you think we'll ever have like a non-racist society? No, because like there's always going to be hierarchy, and like naturally so. Like we're built for that. And everything is built for a natural hierarchy.
So since we're talking about race and we're talking about race in America, especially black people in America, do you think that black people would have behaved differently given the opportunity to do what white people did to us? if you went back and you reversed the roles where the Africans were the ones with the ships and the guns and the advancements,
Yeah.
do you think they would have been?
Yep. I do. I think if you interject any race, like musical chairs and stuff, I think that the same thing would happen. Like it'd be reversed. Like we'd be talking about, or like we'd be white talking about black people, and like it'd be cool. You know what I'm saying?
So let me ask you this, and I'll ask you this. I'm doing a lot of questions tonight.
I know. I feel like Jimmy. I feel like
we
like
did interviews. We do a lot of arguing and we do a lot of debating, and you know, I wanted to make this one more substance because we talk about such a deep conversation. So, do you think that the history of slavery in this country, do you think at some point will we ever get to a point where a person could look at another black person and say, you can't use slavery now. You can't use that as an excuse. Do you think we could ever get to a place of opportunity, a place of freedom, a place of economic success to where you can say, you know what? We made it, baby. Like, you know, you can't use that as an excuse no more.
Yeah, can we? Yes. Like, will we? Like we gotta see.
What would that look like for you?
I think when we, as a culture, right, and not necessarily as a race, but as a culture, I think that when we decide to build a financial power base, like the Asians do, or like the Jews do, you know, or like even like some of the Italians, like I think when we actually come together and decide to have like an actual financial power base, that's really the only thing that's really gonna nullify the whole conversation of racism. Because like at that point, it don't matter. If you got money, if you got influence and like power and stuff, it don't like that. Like that's when you could say, okay, yeah, like that don't matter. Like okay, like he don't like you, cool. It don't matter. Like buy his company.
Do you think that AI would help with that goal? Do you think that when people are able to shape how they look, how they operate in the world?
I think AI would help when that shit when it like decides to take over the world and we all gotta band together as one human race because we have a common enemy. Like you asked, like that sounds crazy, I know, but you asked the question: do I ever think there would be a situation? If there was one, like that would be it. Like there would have to be some other foreign threat for us, like to really come together. Just
like right now with the coronavirus and how it's causing people to.
Well, see, like
we have to look out for each other. We have to make sure we're doing our part. That.
Well, yeah. So I have seen that, and like
doesn't
that
discriminate.
Well, see, like I have seen that, but then I still see like these politicians like using this shit for partisan currency, definitely. Man. And like to be fair, it's on both sides, man. Like I was watching I don't have to talk about Fox because we know that, but like I was watching CNN last night, I think it was, and like they ran like the story about Trump and like how he refuses like to not shake hands with people and stuff, right? But on Instagram, I'm seeing like videos of him like doing like the elbow touch, and like it was just like one or two or whatever like that. But like the point I'm trying to make is like the story that they were trying to craft is like he just like didn't do that. And like my thing is just like, okay, like for the left, we don't need to do that. Like we don't need to, craft these stories. Like trust me, he will give enough rope to hang himself. Like just set the camera up.
That's one thing I always said about
just
that.
Like roll the camera.
Pick out the stuff that really matters. You picking on stuff that
shit is dumb, man.
And then when you put it in a bigger picture,
right.
Then it just seems like you pick on everything. And
then like what that does, like it gives motherfuckers like him, like ammo. You know what I'm saying? So when I'm like going back and forth, and then like you bring that up, and then like I ain't got nothing to say because like it's the truth. Like that's what y'all doing. So like we
getting off subject.
Yeah, man.
But we're going to do a part 2 of this because next time we're going to get deep into being black in America. And I'm talking about deep. We're going to talk about hip-hop. We're going to talk about the streets. We're going to talk about
hip-hop.
Black success. We're going to talk about black inventions. We're going to talk about what it's like to be black in America. So this is just part 1. We're going to try to do a part 2. So subscribe now, because that part 2 coming. So hit that bell. Subscribe, hit that bell. You're going to get notified. So you came, you heard, you saw. Now run. Tell them we said it. And if they ask for us by name, make sure you say it twice. This is the Javier Javier Show.